Tales from the darkness.
The thing in the cabin. The old man was weak and sick. His body wouldn't last much longer. I made the old man get up and walk to the window. He looked out and saw them standing there in the snow. There were 4 hunters gathered outside the cabin. I saw them too, through his eyes. The hunters carried long guns and they were shivering with the cold. One of them walked up and banged on the door. "Hello in there," he shouted. "Hello. We're lost and we need a place to stay for the night." I pulled the old man away from the window and made him bar the door. "We have a little money we can give you," the hunter shouted. "We just need a warm place to stay for the night and a little food if you can spare it. We're freezing to death out here." I made the old man throw another log on the fire. "You don't need to be scared of us," the hunter said. "We'll leave our guns outside. We don't mean you no harm." I made the old man pick up his rifle and aim it through a slit in the cabin door. Then I giggled as I made him pull the trigger. There was a loud bang and one of the hunters dropped in the snow. He didn't know what hit him. The others were taken off guard. They dragged their friend's body away and took cover behind the trees. Gunshots exploded, ripping through the wooden door and breaking some of the windows. I released my hold on the old man's brain and he collapsed in a heap on the floor. I flew up the chimney and soared above the cabin. The gunshots stopped and the hunters retreated. They would be back. I flew high above the treetops and followed them. When they stopped, I drifted down and landed in the branches of a tall tree. The hunters were below me. They were setting up camp and building a fire. There were just 3 of them now. A fat one, a skinny one, and a bearded one. The dead one lay nearby, staining the snow red with his blood. I had no use for him. The bearded one chopped wood with his axe. He looked healthy and strong. The skinny one was struggling to light the fire, while the fat one just sat there and watched. I listened as the fat one spoke to the others. He told them that they would camp there for the night and in the morning they would attack the cabin and kill the old man. I sat there in the branches of the tree and waited for nightfall to come. When it was dark, the men curled up around their blazing fire and tried to get some sleep. I waited until they were lying still, and then I dropped down quietly into the snow. I crept towards the fat man who was wrapped up in his fur coat, snoring peacefully. Slowly, I reached out and took hold of the fat man's mind. I made him get up and walk over to where the dead man lay in the snow. I made him kneel down beside the corpse and take out his hunting knife. Then I made him saw through the neck of his dead friend. When he was done, I made him smear his face with blood. Then I made him pick up the severed head and carry it back to the fire. I released my hold on the fat man's mind, and that's where I left him, standing in front of the fire, smeared with blood and holding the dead man's severed head. When he looked down and saw the head, he screamed and woke the others. They scrambled to their feet and stared in horror at their severed head the fat man was clutching. I watched it all from the safety of the trees. There were shouts and more screams as the skinny one and the bearded one grabbed their guns and blasted the fat man until he laid in a bloody heap on the snow. Now there were only two of them. They sat by the fire and waited. I watched and waited too. They were waiting for dawn to arrive. Then they would attack the cabin and kill the old man. The bearded one threw more wood on the fire. He was too scared to sleep. The skinny one was weaker. He laid down and closed his eyes. I took my chance, creeping up to the skinny one and reaching into his mind. I made him take out his hunting knife. I made him slowly get to his feet. And the bearded one stared at us, wondering what was going on. I made the skinny one leap across the flames and attack the bearded one. The skinny one was weak and the bearded one was too strong for him. I knew he would lose the fight. I realized his mind and flew into the trees to watch from a safe distance. There was a fierce struggle, but in the end, the bearded one prevailed. He plunged the hunting knife into his friend's chest and left the skinny one to bleed out on the snow. Now, there was only one. I flew back to the cabin and slipped down the chimney. The old man lay on the floor where I left him. I took hold of his mind again, and we searched through the cabin. There was not much in the place that I could use. In a rusty metal box, I found a pair of garden shears. The handles were rusty, but the blades were still sharp. I made the old man pick them up. I made him look out the window, and through his eyes, I saw the bearded one coming across the snow, his gun ready. "Come out, old man," the bearded one cried. "Come out or I'll kill you." He fired his gun and a bullet ripped through the cabin door. I made the old man shout, "Okay, I'm coming out." I made him open the garden shears and place the blades at either side of his neck. Then I made him throw open the door and walk out into the sunlight. When the bearded one saw him, he stopped in his tracks and raised his gun. "What are you up to, old man?" he demanded. The old man didn't say a word. I wouldn't let him. The bearded man cautiously approached. "Why did you have to start shooting at us?" he asked. "We didn't mean you any harm. We just needed a place to stay." The old man resisted me, and for a moment I lost control. A thin wail escaped his lips. "Help me," he begged. I regained control of his mind, and summoning all the strength he had in his withered arms, I made him slam the handles of the shears together. The blades snapped together, slicing off his head. It fell to the ground with a thud. Then his body crumpled and collapsed in a bloody heap. My grip on his mind was broken and I floated upwards. The bearded one was so shocked and stunned that all he could do was stare in horror at the terrible sight. I took advantage of this momentary weakness, dropping onto his shoulders and reaching into his brain to take charge. Now, he was mine. After we dragged the bodies into the cabin, we feasted on the remains until I was satisfied. I made the bearded man throw another log on the fire, and we sat down in the rocking chair. Together, we rocked back and forth, enjoying the heat from the roaring flames. The bearded man was strong and healthy. His body would last a long time. The writing on the wall. When I was younger, there was a ruined building at the bottom of our street. All of the kids in the area kept well away from it, because the rumor was that it was haunted. The concrete walls of the old two-story building was cracked and crumbling. The windows were broken and shards of glass laid all over the floor inside. One evening, as a test of courage, my best friend and I decided to explore the creepy old place. We climbed in through a window at the back of the building. The whole place was dirty, and there was a layer of mud on the wooden floor. As we dusted ourselves off, we looked up and were shocked to see that someone had written the words, "I am dead," on the wall near the ceiling. Probably just some teenagers trying to scare kids. I said. "Yeah, probably," replied my friend nervously. We explored more of the rooms on the ground floor. In a room that appeared to have once been a kitchen of sorts, we found more writing on the wall. It read, "I am in a room upstairs." We walked up the creaking stairs to the second floor. I led the way and my friend followed close behind. I wasn't scared, but he was beginning to get a little jittery. When we came to the top of the stairs, we turned left and walked cautiously down the narrow hallway. At the end of the hallway was a closed door with some more ominous writing on it. "You will find me in this room." By now my friend was shaking with fear. I was quite creeped out too, but I didn't want to show it. He told me he didn't want to go any further, but I insisted, telling him there was nothing to be afraid of. I turned the handle and the door creaked open. We stepped into the room and found it empty. There were 2 closed doors on either side. There was more creepy writing on the wall. It read, "My head is on the left, and my body is on the right." As soon as my friend saw this, he completely lost his nerve. He gave a yelp and turned to run away. I caught hold of his arm, but he shook me off and fled out through the open door. I heard his footsteps disappearing off down the hallway. I held my ground. I was determined to be brave and overcome my fear. Mustering all my courage, I opened the door on the right and walked inside. I walked to the other side of the room, and on the wall, written in tiny letters, were the words, "My body is underneath." I looked down at the floor. I was standing on some more writing on the floorboards. I stepped back and saw the words, "My head is coming from the room behind you. Turn around." I heard the door behind me creaking and quickly turned. There was a shadow moving behind the door. Suddenly, something rolled into the room and came to rest against the wall. It was my friend's severed head. His dead, sightless eyes seemed to stare at me. Screaming in horror, I flung myself out through the open window and fell 2 stories to the ground. I landed on my side, breaking my arm. In horrible pain, I ran home crying and yelling for my parents. The police were called and they searched the old ruined building. At first, they didn't find anything. There wasn't even any writing on the wall. They combed the house from top to bottom but didn't find any traces of my friend. Then they pried up the floorboards. His body was lying underneath. They never found his head. The video camera. A few years ago, there was a young man named Brian who went to university. He didn't have enough money to live in the campus accommodation, so he had to rent an apartment on his own in the city. After he had been living there alone for a while, he began to notice some strange things happening. Often, when he came back from college, the curtains in his bedroom would be drawn, when he distinctly remembered having left them open when he left that morning. At other times, Some of his belongings seemed to have been moved, and other possessions were nowhere to be found. These strange occurrences started to creep Brian out, so the young man decided to talk to his friends, Trisha and Alex, about the situation. They met him at a local diner, and over coffee, he told them all about the strange things he had noticed. Maybe I'm just being paranoid, said Brian. But I just get this sneaking suspicion that someone is breaking into my apartment during the day while I'm at school. And what? Interrupted Alex. Rearranging your curtains and moving your stuff around? Who in their right mind would bother doing that? It sounds crazy, but you might have a stalker, said Trisha. It's a possibility. If it's true, I think the best thing to do is contact the police. What can the police do? Asked Alex. They're not going to spend their time keeping your apartment under surveillance. Besides, there's no damage to any of your things. There's no sign of a break-in. In short, there's no evidence. So what options then? Pleaded Brian. I can't just do nothing. I know how you can put your mind at ease, said Trisha. It's easy. Just get a video camera, set it up in your bedroom, and leave it running when you go to college. If you really do have a stalker, you can show the tape to the police as evidence. You know, that's a great idea, said Brian. And if you're really just paranoid and crazy, you can just show the tape to your psychiatrist, joked Alex. That night, Brian borrowed Trisha's video camera and brought it home. The very next morning, he hid it discreetly under some folders on his desk. Before he went to school, he pressed the record button and left it running. During the day, while he sat taking notes in lectures, the young man forgot all about the video camera. It wasn't until he arrived home and went into his bedroom that he remembered his plan. Taking the video camera out of his hiding place, he pressed the stop button. Then he took out his mobile phone and called his friend. Hey Trisha, he said. I just got home. I'm going to watch the video. Cool, replied Trisha. Don't hang up. Tell me if you see anything. He pressed play and watched the recording on the video camera's tiny screen. He saw himself leaving for university in the morning and closing the bedroom door. Then, there was nothing. He pressed fast forward and scanned through the video. The room was empty. Still nothing, he said. I can wait, replied Trisha. Anyways, there's nothing worth watching on TV at the moment. Oh my God, cried Brian as he pressed play on the camera. What? What? Trisha begged excitedly. The door's opening, said Brian. It's a woman. What's she doing? Asked Trisha. Just standing there, closing the door, walking around. Oh my God, so weird. What does she look like? I can't see her face. She got long black stringy hair, a tattered dress. Do you know her? No, I don't recognize her at all. She's carrying a knife. A big kitchen knife. She's going through my trash. Now she's picking up my clothes and sniffing them. Ugh, gross. What's wrong with her? She's going over to the closet. She just got into the closet. Well, fast forward and see if she does anything else. Brian scanned through the video for a while, but the room was empty. You know what this means, said Brian. I have the evidence now. I can go to the police and they'll take me seriously. I know, said Trisha. They'll have to. Alex is totally gonna freak when he sees this. No doubt. He didn't believe you, but I did. I know, you're a good friend. Oh my god! What? Brian pressed play again. The door's opening again, said Brian. Who is it? Asked Trisha. Oh, it's okay, said Brian. It's just me coming home from college. He watched himself on the screen, shutting off the camera. Let's go to the police now, said Trisha. I'll go with you. We can show them the tape. Okay. I'll meet you at the diner in 15 minutes, said Brian as he grabbed the video camera. Okay, wait a minute, said Trisha. You said she got into the closet? Did she ever leave? Brian, did she ever get out of the closet? A chill ran down Brian's spine. Behind him, he heard the closet door creak open. Brian, get out of there! Screamed Trisha. But it was far too late. The phone went dead. When she tried to call him again, there was no answer. Later that evening, the police found the body of an 18-year-old college student lying in a pool of blood. He had been stabbed 21 times. The video camera was clutched in his cold, dead hands. When the police examined the camera, they discovered that the memory card was missing. No trace of the woman was ever found. Right now, she could be hiding in your closet. The Earwig. Many years ago, in Borneo, there was an Englishman named Clifford Macy who was young, handsome, and very vain. He fancied himself as God's gift to women and often boasted about his success. Macy was part owner of a tobacco plantation, and his friend and business partner was another Englishman by the name of Leopold Warwick. Despite being old and fat, Warwick had a wife who was very young and very beautiful, and she was the envy of every man who set eyes on her. The three of them lived together in a big house on the plantation. Macy slept in the first bedroom, while Warwick and his wife slept in the second. It was rainy season, and there was precious little to do. Macy was bored, and he could find nothing that would keep him entertained. As time went on, he developed a passion for Warwick's wife and began to wish that he could have her for himself. He often tried flirting with her, but she wouldn't have anything to do with him. One evening, when her husband was away, Macy made a pass at her, but she slapped his face. However, Macy was the kind of man who didn't take no for an answer. Every time she refused him, he became more and more obsessed with her until he was determined to have her at any cost. Although his heart was burning with a white-hot passion, Macy had a devilish and cunning mind. He soon came up with a way to get Warwick out of the picture. In Borneo, there is a type of earwig that lives on waxy secretions. It has a special liking for the human ear. It's so small and light that it could be crawling on your face, and you'd barely even feel it. If it gets into a man's ear, it creeps down the canal, unable to turn around, feeding as it goes and causing weeks of hellish torment until, well, I'm sure you can use your imagination. Macy paid two native men a large sum of money and instructed them to creep into Warwick's bedroom in the middle of the night and place an earwig on his pillow. He went to sleep that night with a smile on his face and dreamed about the horrible fate that was about to befall his friend. The next morning, when Macy came down to breakfast, Warwick seemed bright and cheerful. He watched the old man closely, looking for any signs of discomfort. Just then, Macy felt a strange tickling sensation in his own ear. When he poked his finger into his ear, he discovered that he was bleeding. Jumping up from the table with a look of horror on his face, he shrieked, "The damn thing is in my ear!" It appeared that the men he paid had made a terrible mistake, and during the night they had gone into the wrong room and placed the earwig in the wrong man's ear. That was the beginning of weeks of unimaginable pain and agony. There was nothing the doctor could do for him. He laid in his room, tied to the bed with his wrists lashed to the headboard to prevent him from tearing his own ears off. Day and night, he writhed and screamed as the earwig crept and crawled and twisted through his head, slowly driving him insane. Occasionally, when the earwig was resting, Macy would get a break from his torment, but when it woke up, he would scream and scream and scream. The pain was so unbearable that being flayed alive, burned at the stake, put on a rack, or even hanged by the neck would have been an act of mercy. Every time the doctor came to see him, Macy begged him to put him out of his misery. Then something very unexpected happened. Miraculously, the earwig crawled out of his other ear. Macy had come so close to the brink of death, but he had survived the torment. When he was well enough to talk, the doctor came in to see him. "I suppose they're going to call the police and have me arrested now," said Macy. "No," said the doctor. "They're not calling the police." "Why not?" Macy demanded. "I suppose they're trying to avoid a scandal." "No, they're taking pity on you. They know about your condition." "But what do you mean?" "You see, the earwig was a female," said the doctor. "And she laid some eggs."